Good evening, and welcome to this evening's webinar, ALD Siblings, What Works and What Hurts. My name is Kathleen O'Sullivan-Fortin. I'm honored to represent the Board of Directors here at ALD Connect. I'm an ALD mom, I'm an ALD patient, and I'd first like to introduce you to this lovely lady sitting next to me, my daughter, Margaret.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Maggie Fortin. I'm her daughter and also the summer intern this year.
She's also an ALD sibling. And then next, what you really came for is to meet the next two co-hosts that are joining us this evening. First, I'd like to introduce you to Jesse Torrey, author, ALD superstar, mom, counselor, friend, inspiration, and force of nature. Jesse, take it away.
Well, that's great. I hope that's all on tape so I can play it again and again with myself. Thank you very much. And I get the pleasure of introducing my favorite ALD sibling, Anna Torrey. Anna is a very talented artist. And well, I felt like I had to throw that in there.
All right.
And she is a wonderful sibling to her brother, Jack, who is turning 25 this weekend. And he's 16 years post-transplant. Anna's also starting medical school next week. We are very proud of her.
Hello, everyone.
Do you have a disclaimer you'd like to share?
I do. I was like, ooh, it's time. So before we dive into it, as always, if you've come to any of our webinars in the past, I am thrilled to read the disclaimer. So again, this webinar is for informational purposes only. The discussion is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you or a family member think you're ill, please seek professional medical advice immediately. ALD Connect does not recommend or endorse any specific physicians, treatments, procedures, treatment centers, or products, even though they may be mentioned on this webinar. As always, we intend for this to get the conversation started, but that we understand that there's a lot of follow-up care that may stem from tonight's discussion. And with that, Jesse, Anna, take it away.
Perfect. I'm going to have Anna, my tech support,
Yes, I will share
the
screen.
screen.
Should be good.
Everyone sees it? Yes. Terrific. Well, welcome all of you. This is a topic that many of us have been talking about for quite a while. It's something that is near and dear to my heart, and something that I spent a lot of my time while in graduate school studying, because I've been so impressed with the ALD siblings and special siblings in general. And I want to see if I couldn't find out through research what is helpful for these children and what might want to be avoided. So let's get started. Siblings have a unique bond, and those of you who are siblings yourselves, whether ALD or otherwise, know how beautiful and wonderful sibling relationships can be, and how challenging they can be no matter what the circumstances. And oh, that was fancy how that scrolled across. I didn't even know I did that. ALD siblings have unique challenges. And we're going to start with ALD being complicated. Most of the people on this call are parents, grandparents, or caregivers of people with ALD. And we all know how complicated ALD is for everyone. The newborn screening families have this wonderful opportunity to be able to monitor their children, but we appreciate how complicated their circumstances are. Many of them are getting notified just weeks after the birth of their healthy child that they've had this news. So certainly complications, probably too small of a word. Early diagnosis, late diagnosis can all be complicated. My son Anna's brother was a late diagnosis. He's doing well-ish, but it can be complicated. Children being diagnosed as a child versus an adult. The monitoring phase for the newborn screening families is very complicated and time-consuming. The very treatments, gene therapy is such an incredible new option for us to have on the table, but I appreciate that it's difficult for families to decide who to get tested. When I looked at the questions that people had when they signed up for this interview, that was mentioned several times, how broad a net to cast when it comes to testing. And some people had asked about getting daughters tested, which is something I think we can talk about at the end of this if anybody has questions about that. Every family is different, and how many siblings are affected by the gene, how many relatives are being affected also is complicated. I also added, is mom also affected to that as a separate thing? Many of us as mothers are the primary caregivers for our boys with ALD, and it does add a complicated wrinkle if mother also develops symptoms along the way. So what's it like specifically for the siblings? Instead of me guessing, I've reached out to the ALD community, and like always, they really rose to the occasion. I was able to speak with loads and loads of parents and grandparents, and some of you were open enough with me to allow me to speak with your children. So I got a lot of quotes, and I think hearing from the siblings themselves is important. So Anna and I are going to take turns here. I'm a patient too. That came up again and again. We need to remember when we are treating our boys, we often are taking along the other siblings, so they feel that their lives are as affected as their siblings are.
It's been rough.
Yes.
Yes.
When he first got out of the hospital and had no hair and a line, I snuggled him in bed, and it scared me. Fear came up a lot, particularly right during treatment and right following treatment. Lives can change so quickly and dramatically, and fear is common for children because there's a huge unknown, and their sibling can look different and act different, and fear can be a natural consequence.
My grandparents were acting like my parents.
I heard this specifically about grandparents, but also about anyone who's caregiving. While we're going through treatment, we have to, as parents, let go a little. And often these ALD siblings are being cared for by third parties. And even though they may love and adore their grandparents or aunts and uncles, friends, it is difficult when somebody else is filling the shoes of your parent. Makes me feel like a background character. This person should be a writer because I love the beauty in the way that was phrased. And I think there is some real truth to that, particularly during the diagnosis, during the treatment. Often the siblings are background characters.
Yep. It was so hard seeing my brother go through that. Sort of speaks for itself. Yeah.
Even after transplant, I still worry.
I braced myself for doing it and felt like a failure that I couldn't. And that's in regards to being a donor.
And that is another complication of our disease. Many families are looking for the best match. If we're moving forward with a bone marrow transplant, and siblings are generally, if they are a match, a wonderful option. It's very difficult as a parent, having gone through that. We tested you. It's the one test Anna has ever failed. She was not a match for her brother, but it was very difficult going through that process. I hadn't really appreciated how complicated it is for siblings, particularly those siblings that are old enough to recognize that they're going through a medical procedure and the fear that might be associated with that. But also this idea of feeling like a failure if you are not a match. Also, I spoke with families whose children did not survive, and that's another layer on top. I kept it together and joked with him, then said I was going to get something and went into the hallway. I fell to the ground. Sorry, I can't read this.
And the whole corridor just came crashing down on me.
Thank you. This young person had such a gift with words. What I found interesting, and I'm sure a lot of you parents out there who have gone through treatment have done a similar thing of walking away to have a moment and kind of a crushing blow. But to hear that the siblings are feeling what we're feeling, it's important. We started the long journey of appointments. That word "we" is something I want to keep going back to, because these siblings are part of the circumstances. As much as we wish they weren't, they are, and we need to keep reminding ourselves of that.
You're expected to achieve for two, live for two, make your parents happy and proud, but for two.
Another great writer. But that it is so true. As much as we try to avoid, as parents, there is a pressure for these siblings to make up for what the families have lost and what their siblings have lost. And I thought that was a beautiful way of putting it. I always know what my brother wants. Siblings have that kind of bond, and that continues, and we need to appreciate and recognize that. So we're not done yet. There are a few more.
I watched my oldest brother go through all the phases of AMN and eventually cerebral ALD, and all I could think was, is that my future too?
This was a quote from an adult who's struggling with AMN now, and I thought it was such an important thing to recognize that those siblings that carry the gene, even though they might not be presenting with symptoms at all or different symptoms, there's always that question in people's minds as to what's going to happen with them. I'm getting the dog squeaky toy. Oh no, he left. It's very hard. Oh, it's hard, very hard, and still hard even after transplant.
I had so many worries and so many unknowns. All of it takes control of your head.
So we can see from those quotes and those words directly from the siblings some of what they're going through. So their specific challenges as ALD siblings, they're getting less attention. Whether we want to be, whether we're trying or not, there's no way around the fact that the attention on them is going to be limited.
I will say too, I'm going to add, even if attention at home might be more balanced from the community often, or friends of family or extended family, even if parents are making that extra effort, it often goes beyond that. And even outside of the home, everybody might know about something. I mean, of course, every family has differences in how much they share with the community, but in a lot of cases, it can be really an overwhelming difference in, how much attention from the broader.
Thank you, Anna. Well said.
And I agree. I just wanted to chime in. I know that, we tried to keep things balanced at our house, but that I know that, every time we visit my mom, all of her friends and neighbors will say, and how is John doing? And, the girls might be standing right there with me, but it's just little subtle, things that weave themselves into every interaction once you let it out that you're struggling with ALD as a family.
And I think the word subtle is such an important one. Sometimes things are glaring, easy to see, but we as parents and grandparents and people caring for these siblings need to look out for the subtle things that are going on too. There's less consistency. We as parents try to be consistent with our rules, with our boundaries, our consequences, all that. It can all go out the window pretty quickly, and that can be complicated. And the siblings, of course, are worried about their brother and what's going on and what's going to happen and what the future holds. But they're also worried about their parents. Even children, we sometimes think they don't spend much time thinking about us, but they do, and they worry about us too. And the pressure to be perfect is, I think, one of the reasons I've found repeatedly that special needs siblings in general, and ALD siblings in particular, are such wonderful kids and go-getters and all that. Part of that is they have felt that pressure to be perfect. They can become the secondary caregiver. Anna, how old were you when Jack went through treatment?
I was 7 years old.
She turned 7 that summer. When did you learn to set up the G-tube for him?
Probably when I was 8. I don't remember. I don't remember not knowing how to.
When was the first diaper you changed?
I don't remember.
Okay, I won't share it because it's really young, but I think all you parents out there who have gone through similar circumstances, as much as we try to avoid asking these siblings for help, we do, or sometimes we don't even ask for help, but they're providing it. So there's a lot of stress that goes along with it. And life doesn't stop. I remember in 2008, the beginning of 2008, doing our taxes, and I forgot to do quite a lot. And the fact that we had just gone through this extraordinary year in 2007, and I had been expected to also pay my taxes appropriately seemed unfair. But life goes on when there's a struggle like this, and life goes on for these siblings, whether or not their brother has been diagnosed and being monitored, whether or not their sibling is being treated, their life continues. They have school and sports and hobbies. They may have unrelated health issues, emotional issues, academic issues. And I added peer relationships too, because peer relationships are complicated. And when you are different than your peers, particularly at certain ages, that can be very difficult. So there's fear of what the future is going to hold, fear about your sibling and their survival and their quality of life. Embarrassment. You can be embarrassed that your family suddenly looks very different than the families of your peers. Children often feel guilt that why did this happen to them, not me? Isolation. We've talked a lot about the fact that as much as people try, sometimes these kids are left to deal with things on their own. Anger is allowed, and it is common, of course, being angry that life isn't going the way you expected, that life isn't fair, that nature is cruel. Anger is a common thing for all of us that are struggling with our disease. Confusion is something that many young people feel, and we're going to talk more about how to work with that. Jealousy is always an interesting thing to add to a list, because it seems like, why on earth would somebody be jealous of their sibling going through something so horrific? But the amount of attention, and like Jack had presents all the time, and prayers for him from everywhere, and letters and notes. So jealousy is something that children can feel. Unfortunately, like with a lot of things in life, there are things we cannot control. The individual challenges of our family, of our child with ALD, or children without ALD. The schedule of care is often determined by the doctors, and we just need to do cartwheels around what they're recommending. The pain and discomfort that children face, it all varies, and we often can't control that. And unfortunately, with our disease, not everybody survives. But there are things, now this is where we can take some control. Open communication is, I think, the biggest part of helping special siblings, helping the ALD siblings. Open communication means, one, being available to answer questions, being approachable enough for children, no matter what their age, to ask questions and to answer the questions that are asked. We're going to talk a little bit more about keeping things age appropriate, and I'm going to go back to that, answering the questions that are asked. It's important to really listen to your children. Including the siblings in conversations is great, but also in doctor's visits, in hospital stays. When children are not provided information, they can fill their brain with the answers, and that can often be more difficult than the reality that's there. It's important as parents, grandparents, guardians, for us to support the siblings' relationships. Anna, what do you do with Jack to hang out?
Oh, we do it all. We go on long walks, we watch movies. We have a very close relationship because it was supported by my
It's all
lovely mother always.
How about you, Maggie? What do you do with John?
Yeah, I do everything. I don't know. Yeah, we're always together. Like,
Yeah, I think it's nice. I think, the older you get, I like watching the new ways you find to spend time together, that, that you guys like each other as nascent adults, is, pretty satisfying.
Mhm.
And not without challenges. Like, it's, as nice as that sounds, there will also be a place for sibling rivalry, natural, sibling tensions. That doesn't stop. You don't become an angel. You don't become an angel walking the earth and a perfect person because you're diagnosed with ALD. So, do you think that's hard sometimes to express that, or is that something that comes in, like, adds to some of the dynamic?
I think it definitely used to more. Like I think it was brought up a lot more as like, I don't know how, sometimes you just be like, well, but Maggie.
Oh, no, and I do want to state,
Yeah.
I want to state for the record, she is allowed and encouraged to point out maybe some areas of growth for me as a parent. And I'm sure Aunt Anna, your mom feels the same way. Like, we know we're not
I
perfect,
don't know.
but
I don't know if she, I don't know if she would really be receptive to.
she already said open communication. Let's go.
No, and that is, I think it's so important for, I think, parenting in general. But when we have very specific circumstances, the way our families do, communication becomes even more important, right? And listening to them becomes more important because we need to learn what they need. Private time with the special siblings, that can be hard, particularly when going through treatment.
Meaning parents.
Parent,
private time
yeah,
with
sorry.
special siblings.
Thank you,
Yes.
Anna. That is true. See, she's not scared to interrupt me. No, but that it is true. Parents, and sometimes the parents together with the sibling or siblings, sometimes individually. And you may need to carve out that time because the opportunity for it to happen naturally may not be there. In our family, Dan, a big lacrosse fan.
My dad, our dad.
Oh, sorry.
Dan.
Dan, Jack's dad, Anna's dad too. Big lacrosse fan. That became you all's
Right.
time.
He coached my local team, and so it was like a very normal relationship with a parent growing up, a close one, but outside of ALD talk entirely, just a shared interest and a shared activity, bonding time, aside from everything else. So, yeah.
And it's something like coaching, there's a schedule involved. If you don't have anything like that you share with a child, you may have to organize, bi-weekly movie nights or dinners out, but remember to spend time just with them. It's also important to create a support system for these children. You may be distracted and your spouse, the rest of the family may all be distracted, and you need to make sure your children have other adults within their lives that they trust and feel comfortable with, that you have had conversations with them so they recognize what you need them to do, which is to be available for these kids. Could be teachers in school, it could be notifying the counseling program at the children's school. It could be rallying all the aunts and uncles and all your best friends to make sure that your child has access to their phone numbers, but create a real support system for them. Also, providing a space for rest and relaxation is really important. Camps, clubs, activities can all be a wonderful, healthy distraction for these children. Counseling, therapy, support groups, all very helpful. If anybody has trouble finding support groups in their area, I'd be glad to do research for them or finding a therapist that works with special needs siblings. I do have some access to, I could help, so please reach out. And taking care of yourself is very important. If you don't take care of yourself and if you are struggling, everyone around you is going to have a more difficult time.
Jesse, I also wanted to say, I think it's so important for people, not as part of taking care of themselves, to treat themselves with some grace and realize that every single ALD parent looked at that list of challenges and felt it. And maybe as you flipped that up, I may have been giving myself grades on every tick point. Did I do this? Could I have done a better job? But I know that, it's so important to just approach ourselves with the attitude, and our children, as they're all of us, with the attitude of grace, that these are extraordinary circumstances and challenges. And, every day is another chance to get it right, or to do it better, or to fix whatever you think you're not meeting the grade. So I have to say that, because if it's true for me, then it's true for everyone.
And that is beautifully said. And I would like to applaud everybody who signed up for this webinar as at least considering learning more, starting the conversation with their child, with their partners, with their extended family. So you're right. Giving ourselves grace, and also recognizing the things we are doing well. Super important.
Yeah, I tend to believe that if people are asking the question, am I doing a good job? Or is there more I could do for my child who is a sibling? The answer is yes, because you asked, because you're thinking about it. How many of us, even if you're asking a year later, you're still asking the question, and you have the opportunity to work on it.
Exactly. There are also things that I'm hoping there are no small children listening, because as we get into questions and answers, the conversation may not be quite appropriate for young ears, but there are things that ALD siblings can do for themselves. It's important for them to learn to listen to themselves and to reach out for help when it's appropriate. Spending time with their siblings is such an important thing to do, but also taking time when you need it for yourself, right?
Yeah. And I think building a community outside of family life is really important also. To this day, I grew up in Maple, New Jersey, and then went to college, and now I'm post-college, and I have been fortunate to have plenty of friends along the way, but to this day, my closest friends are the ones who've known me since I was little and know Jack and understand my family dynamic, and were there for everything because they just understand the very unique struggles and the very unique things that I would always need escaping from, and they were my people for it. So it was such a great thing to have that community, and I still have them today. So I think take time for yourself, including take time for social time outside of the family, use the community, use other people as support, because there is no escaping it entirely when you're at home.
She's good. That was good. And this is something that I try to do with myself, but I think it's important to share this with these ALD siblings, is to focus on what you have and not on what you don't have. There's some ways that I can help. There's some ways to get started in doing this. If you find that your ALD child, the non-ALD child, is struggling a bit with focusing on the positive, at the end of the day, taking a moment to think of 3 good things that happened during the day. Sounds so silly, but it can really help end the day on a high note. And I started doing this when Jack was getting his transplant. And trust me, there were days where finding the 3 things was very difficult to find. And the 3 things weren't what people not going through that circumstance would come up with. It was, I had a really great bagel this morning, or I got to shower today. They were small little things, but Focusing on what we have, focusing on a sliver of positive, if we can be helpful, particularly for the ALD siblings. There are other things to consider. ALD, things change a lot. There are many phenotypes of our disease and many highs and lows. We need to make sure we make adjustments along the way. Also, age matters. And that's both for the affected child and the siblings. And now I'm going to go back to the answering the questions that are asked. All siblings are different. All these ALD siblings are different. I looked at the list of who is registered for tonight, and the ages of the affected children are 6 months to 53 years old. And the ages of the ALD siblings were, in one case, the person was pregnant, so 0 to 56 years old. You have very different conversations with a 3-year-old and a 56-year-old, obviously, or a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old. And also, each of these kids are individuals, and each of them need to be recognized as such. So whenever I'm advising someone, when they say, well, what's age appropriate for a 6, 7, 8, 20-year-old? I say, what's appropriate is to answer the question that they're asking. And I asked Anna earlier today if she remembered this. You said no.
I did.
Anna was 7 years old when Jack was still in the process of healing from his transplant. And we weren't sure if he was going to come home. And she felt it. She knew it. Kids are aware of what's going on, at least on some level. And I went home one night. I would go home once a week to spend the night with her. And she curled up with me and she asked if Jack was dying. And I paused for a really long time thinking, I don't want to have to say these words, but I also didn't want to be somebody that she couldn't trust. And I didn't know that the answer was a definite, Jack's going to be okay. He's going to get home soon and things are going to be fine. So I said, I don't know. That was answering the question she asked. I didn't go into detail about what was going on with his blood counts. I didn't go into detail about the GI issues he was having and whether or not it was graft versus host disease. I didn't go into detail about his chimerism. I was talking to a 7-year-old girl who was asking if her brother was going to come home. And I answered that question. So as difficult as it is, try to really listen to the words your kids are asking and answer them. And that's super important. Sorry, that's my long way of saying that. But being realistic, I still have the talking dream a lot that Jack will someday jump out of bed and tell me long, wild stories. I have a lot of hope that things might change, but I'm also realistic. And I think it's important for all of us to be hopeful and positive, but to be realistic and to be kind to ourselves, all of us, as Kathleen so beautifully said, as parents, but also as siblings. Now, Maggie and Anna, there are some benefits to being an ALD sibling. And this is what started my eagerness to find out more about them. Empathy, compassion, independence, patience, resilience, these are all qualities that have been nurtured by their crazy circumstances that they've lived through. They've learned empathy and compassion because they've lived with somebody who's struggling. They have learned independence because mom and dad aren't always there to sign all those forms at the beginning of school, which I thought it was computerized because I never signed them. I found out.
I think I can do her signature better than she can.
It turned out great. I mean, look, independent. Patience. These kids learn that sometimes their needs are second, third, fourth, 10th on the list in the hierarchy of needs of a family. And they need to learn to be patient, and they do. And resilience. Right, Maggie? Strong, fierce warrior. There are helpful resources. ALD Connect doesn't just do wonderful webinars and have great annual meetings, which I hope everybody is attending in November. I'm sure Kathleen will add that to the chat.
November 3rd and 4th in Houston, y'all. Woohoo!
It's going to be great. But they also have monthly calls. They have CALD calls. They have women's calls, AMM calls, caregiver calls. They have a wonderful call in Spanish with a great facilitator. It happens to be my mother.
We also have newborn screening and monitoring phase calls, so that a lot of these sibling issues are discussed in a small group monthly as people try to navigate, making all the appointments, and also ways to make their siblings feel included as the family gets monitored for ALD.
Those calls are wonderful, and you can see them all on the ALD Connect website and register, I'm sure. Okay. ALD Connect also has a fabulous peer mentor program. It's for adults only currently, but it's wonderful. So if you are looking for somebody to act as your mentor, if you're looking to connect with an individual that may have a similar journey as you were going through, ALD Connect does an excellent job of pairing people within the community. And again, that's on the website, and it's amazing. And there are new programs coming up, so stay tuned.
Yep.
Kathleen's not giving it away.
Always.
There are books too. Hi, my name is Jack was a wonderful book that Kathleen found. And it can be, it's on Amazon.
Yep. All I did was a search for, children's book, siblings of sick children. And there was a whole bunch in various reading levels, for older kids and teens and adults. There are, they're not necessarily ALD specific, but that they are shedding light on the same issue that we're talking about. And also the Alex TLC came out with that book when my brother got ill. I will say this is an exceptional resource. It's written to accommodate multiple reading levels. So you can, if you're kind of a one sentence per picture page kind of family at that level, you can read through the titles and the highlights and you'll get the gist of it. But if you have an older child who can really power through, there's additional explanations. I want to point out that this was made available to the community from our partners, Alex TLC in the UK. And when I was lucky enough to be over there, they did give me a dozen copies to give out here in the States. So do reach out to us at ALD Connect, and we're happy to send this to you. We do still have some limited copies available. If people think this When My Brother Got Ill would be a good resource. I will say the story tracks a family with a brother who becomes symptomatic with the cerebral form and becomes very symptomatic. So I just want to make sure it may not be the right subject matter if you're early in your ALD family journey, or if someone is asymptomatic, it may just be it might be too much of a story and too much info. But if you do find yourself in the situation where one of your children has cerebral ALD, this might be a helpful tool to, again, just get discussion started to help inform a teacher or a physician or a caregiver or a counselor. So don't hesitate to reach out to ALD Connect, and we can try to connect you with one of these.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I think it's important that this is just the beginning, that you all leave today's discussion and it's the beginning of the conversation with your children, with the other adults in your children's lives, and within our community. And I have some more beautiful ALD siblings there. And now I was hoping that we could take some questions and that Maggie and Kathleen could help us answer them. Are they in the chat?
I will say there have not been many put into the chat here tonight, but I will say that we do know that we did receive questions ahead of time. So everyone, I'm reminded in the chat, it says, please feel free to post your questions so that we can address them. I would like to know, I'll just ask Maggie. Maggie, do you feel like any part of the discussion so far really resonated with you or hit a nerve, or that you thought, because we have a different family story. Your brother was diagnosed at age 5. Maggie was 7. He had adrenal insufficiency, which turned out to be ALD. We went through testing and sibling testing because we didn't know if we would need a transplant and needed a match. We have been lucky for 13 years that we have not been in that situation. He has not done, so we have a very long monitoring journey as a family, but very lucky not to have needed a transplant. But doesn't mean that ALD has not touched his siblings. Any thoughts? Anything?
Yeah, I don't know. Like my sister and I were also had to go to all the appointments, and he got his blood drawn before school, like once a month and stuff like that. And, it seemed like most of the adults I was talking to in my life would always ask about it, whether because he was on Florence's oil trial, so he had a dietary restriction. So people were always saying, why? What's that? I learned this speech from my mom. How do I explain it? Do you know Susan Sarandon? Even though I didn't understand what any of it was, like I knew what she said, so I would say it too. So it was sort of an automatic. I was able to spit out the facts.
I like it.
That's interesting that the kids, I'm sure you were the same way, that you were very aware of what you were hearing and you knew what to repeat.
Yeah,
Smart girls.
we have some questions.
The kids ALD awareness building campaign, like send her out there, put her to work. So I'm noticing in the chat, one common question that we did receive was, at what age would you recommend starting to talk to children about their siblings' ALD diagnosis? And I know you've talked a little bit about age appropriate and answering appropriate questions, but do you, from your own experience and from your training, do you think that there's a time when it's too early, or is it possible to always kind of keep it keep family discussion open?
I think every family is different. I'm going to start with that. But generally, the problem with hiding information is you are adding a negative slant to said information. And as much as none of us are huge fans of ALD and what it's doing to our families, I think it can be dangerous for children if we're hiding it in a box. So I would say, in a very age appropriate, light way, to always have that information be out there. And it can change as the questions change from the people.
I agree. I also think we live in a computer age where kids have access to computers at school, at home, on their phone, on a watch, I think it's, as much as we would like to bubble wrap them, if they're old enough and have a search engine or access to one, again, it may not even be at your own home. It may be at school, that you can look up. There's only so much that ALD Connect and our partner organizations can do to keep good stories on the internet. We know that that not every ALD story is a good one. And
as much as we might not be ready to share with our children the other child's diagnosis, Aunt Betty might have told her children, and the cousins are playing together, and then this information that your parents have not shared in a safe, appropriate way comes out. And then I get concerned about communication within the family getting confusing. So
absolutely. And I know that people have specifically asked in the chat, do you think it's necessary to tell them how bad all the terrible avenues that ALD can take, that it's deadly, that it's potentially life-altering, shortening, changing?
I think that's so hard. Our disease has changed so much since Jack was diagnosed 16 years ago. It was a world before newborn screening. The momentum, not that changes weren't being made, and there were loads of people doing wonderful, amazing things, but I don't think you need to list all the phenotypes and what they all look like. But saying ALD is one of these strange disorders that can look different depending the person. So there are a lot of different directions this can go in. We are keeping your brother as safe as we can. And we have a team of doctors, and we, and tell them what you're doing, how you were taking control. But I don't think details about statistics and stuff are necessary.
Yeah, I would agree. I know when John was diagnosed, I told the kids, and I told John, because he was only 5, I said, ALD is like a switch. Not everyone has it. It's inside you. It's turned off. We're going to do everything we can, as if we could control it, but come along on this magical journey. We'll keep the switch off with everything we can do. The doctors are looking, and if the switch gets turned on, then we have a team of people that will try and turn it off. But let's just hope that it stays off and we're going to enjoy ourselves. But that's why we have extra appointments. And, they were 3, 5, 7 at that point. So I just didn't. And I really, obviously, at the beginning, I couldn't even understand the science behind it either. So that was the same level of appropriate answer for our neighbors and for our friends. So
I love the switch idea. That well done.
Well, because I said, maybe if you're the match, maybe there's something inside you that can turn the switch back off. like trying to hope that transplant maintains that, like, let's take this metaphor, but
I like it. I like it.
There's some more questions.
there are.
One for Maggie. Somebody is in a similar situation with monitoring and siblings that are 8 and 10. And they would love to hear if you have anything to say about that experience, the ongoing monitoring.
And adrenal insufficiency. Our
Yeah.
house is full of emergency meds, pills.
Yeah, I guess because it's always been monitoring, it's always felt just like he's, oh, my brother, he's got to take pills all the time. We go to the doctors more often, but it felt more like I think the way my parents explained it to me, it feels like I've always known, like, right now he's okay or whatever. So that's just sort of how I think forever I've always felt that way. I've always,
You know where the emergency meds
yeah,
are.
I know where the emergency meds are. I'm close with the school nurse. I think,
Yeah,
I don't know.
'cause
I've always felt pretty secure, I guess, that somehow something would work out. Like, it wasn't, I don't think I was ever really constantly anxious about it, or I knew that I didn't have it and I was comforted by that in some way.
But that's another complication that can come up is if you're in monitoring phase and you have someone who is adrenally insufficient, you may be in a position where you may be scooping someone from school because they are entering crisis. And, oh yeah, who's going to tell Maggie that we're not staying for Girl Scouts? Or maybe I
Right.
forgot to pick you up from Girl Scouts once. She went home with a nice family. Or, things happen.
They got pizza for dinner.
They did. We were not having pizza. So this win for Maggie.
No, I think there was a big indication being made, the difference between like regular sick and John sick, like when he was in crisis or anything. This wasn't the stomach bug. Like, I didn't have to run away. and,
Right. Yeah, you girls would
be like,
freak
oh
out.
no, I'm gonna miss school this week.
No,
'Cause
I'd say
I'd
you have to hold, you were very concerned you would throw up. I would make you hold the popcorn bowl in the car on the way to the hospital because that's where he's barfing. So, because I'd be like, you can't get this. You can't catch what John has. You can't catch this one. Well, I mean, you can in the bowl, but you get it.
You're reminding all of us never to share popcorn with you at our house.
BYOB, bring your own bowl at my house because you never know what's happened in there. I know there really important question there are tons and I hope we get to all of them, but I'm noting a really important one from Stephanie. If should siblings see their own therapist? Would it be helpful? Or would it be better just to talk about it at home with the family?
Anna did not see a therapist. People did encourage me to find one. I always thought I was going to wait until I saw some sort of struggling. In retrospect, now that I am a therapist, I kind of recognize you don't need to be in crisis to have somebody that you are speaking with. I think what's nice if you can find somebody before children, adult, and no matter where you are, before in crisis, so you have a connection. Do you
But
disagree?
I think I disagree. And part of this
Okay.
is my personality. I'm not super receptive. Like I don't, well, I was gonna say I don't love to talk to strangers about like family details, but that's actually not true. But anyway, I just think at a young age, it would have made me feel even more other from all my classmates and friends if I was like forced, if I wasn't asking for it and I was forced to have this therapist and develop a relationship with a random stranger to prepare me if I have a hard time. I totally appreciate the idea behind it. And some kids might really find comfort in that. But I think the other end is like, if your child doesn't want it, is not expressing that they want this other support system, and then it could just kind of be something that they resent, and it makes them feel like there's yet another way that their life is being affected by ALD, because nobody else is being forced to see a therapist for no reason that's apparent to them, so something to consider.
So we fall in the "it depends" category of answers where know your children, try, maybe offer it or try it once. And if it's met with resistance, take them where they are and say, okay, not for you.
Yeah.
And then similarly, in terms of, there's another question about that jealousy and how, I thought it was so cool, Jesse, how you mentioned that it seems ridiculous to think that you would be jealous. No one's jealous of having ALD per se, but there's some goodies that sometimes can come along with being the ALD patient. I know that, like, do you remember when we got to go to the Boston Aquarium and only John, and so it was a special program set up and only John got a swag bag. So our whole family was allowed to go, and we got to feed the electric eels and go behind the scenes after the aquarium
Only
closed.
he got to touch the tentacle of the octopus.
Oh,
It was a well-intentioned, well-crafted, and I'm so grateful for the program because now I've just put out a whole bunch of details. But it was an issue as we drove away because there was one swag bag. So sometimes you can't control that. But do you have any tips? Because I know you mentioned the gifts and goodies.
Well, I'm going to mention the fact, and I know a lot of families, if you go through transplant, you are eligible for a Make-A-Wish. And we did the good old Disney World. And that Make-A-Wish does do an extraordinary job recognizing that it's the whole family is included. So Anna received everything. And we got to go on Space Mountain again. And again, Jack couldn't even go on, but we could. So I think people, organizations, and I hope people in general are recognizing that when an illness affects a child, it truly is affecting the entire family. So shame on that aquarium. No, I'm kidding.
No, it was so great. We all got to be there.
Yeah, no,
but it was great. It was one of the, we felt guilty because we hadn't been through transplant. We just were monitoring, and then we said, but this is not easy. But I would say to parents that, again, it can't be said enough that we all have the best of intentions as parents to treat and parent our children equally, but it is not, it is not always possible. Or I may have needed more candy bribes or stickers or toys, movies, whatever bribe, letting them eat, I do try to parent. I think I moved away from parenting everyone equally and moved to giving them what they each need. And
Kathleen, that's so important. The idea of us all being even Steven with children, ALD aside, that's really not our responsibility as parents. We need to provide our children with what they need individually. And when some of our kids have ALD, whether it's in the monitoring stage, or the treatment or life beyond treatment, or the kids do not have, we just need to provide them what they need to gain the tools they need to move on with life. So thank you for sharing that.
There's another question for Maggie and Anna. Do you have any guilt for not having ALD?
I don't. I don't think I ever really struggled with guilt about not having ALD, but I think growing up, and I think more so having guilt over getting to live a typical life, and my sibling having so many complications that prevent him from having a more normal life. So I think that has been a bigger thing. Also guilt directed more towards my parents, because I think all ALD siblings can recognize that their parents can't relax the way that their friends' parents can relax, and vacation doesn't mean the same thing to them as it does for other people, because it's not full vacation. They can't really let go. They have to be checking back in 10 times more often. So I think growing up, I've felt bad about knowing it's not really my fault, but I felt bad about living a more typical life, having more freedom than Jack, but also living and having fun and having more freedom than my parents, who are sort of bound to the caregiver role indefinitely in life. So I think guilt for sure, but not necessarily about not having ALD, just sort of the other ways that it's affected our family.
That's going to make me cry, right?
I'm like, Jesse Torrey, you've done good. She is delightful and wonderful.
That's so nice.
Oh, don't cry. Okay. Maggie, do you feel guilt?
Yeah, I don't think I ever felt guilty for not having it. I guess in the beginning I was like, well, why does he have this and I don't? Right? How did it miss me? I'm older than him. Like that was how I was first. But yeah, I don't think I ever felt a lot of guilt, I guess, about not having it. But again, like I knew how it negatively impacted him and impacted you guys, and that I think I always felt very lucky to be separated from his situation in some way.
Yep. And then do you, this is again for both Anna and for you, Maggie, what about ALD because again, both our families are in different predicaments and pathways with ALD. Is there anything, knowing about what the future could hold? Like for John, it's likely that it's adrenomyeloneuropathy, AMN, and could take a cerebral turn, because that is an adult possible situation as well. Is there anything about that? Do you feel like that weight of it hanging on you, or are you just kind of trying to see what the future holds and address it when it comes?
I think more that I think I've since his diagnosis, I've always been aware of it being a possibility, and especially like going back through our family history, knowing like my grandmother's brother, and all of that. So for me, I don't know.
He passed away in high school, when he was in high school.
So for me, I felt like as long as we passed that marker, like of when he was 18, that like, oh, well, in my head, I was like, well, we've made it. And that it was sort of, I don't know, I've always been aware of it, but I don't think it's hindered our relationship or in any way. I think if anything, it's like I should be closer with him,
Right. And Anna, you've got a different complicated relationship with Jack.
Yeah, I think though, similarly, like Maggie, I think we just have each settled into our ALD reality, and it's normal for us. So even though the future holds other question marks, I think the biggest concern for me would just be this lady here, and as my best friend, but also the main caretaker for Jack and the matriarch of the family. Just if anything were to matriarch, I don't know, that's maybe dramatic.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it.
My grandmother
That's my
would take that
mom's
role.
job.
Yeah. But I would say if anything, if anything with female carrier symptoms takes a turn, that's definitely a bit scary. But it's also something, like Maggie said, we've known about it forever. We've known that there's a risk of whatever, and it just kind of taking things as they come has become so normal in our lives. So it might sound crazy that I'm not worried about it, but I'm not really worried about it because it's just normal for us, I guess.
I love that. And then finally, for both of you, Anna and Maggie, I'm curious to see, I know as an ALD patient and as an ALD mom, that's how I identify for so much of my work and for my life and how I meet people. Do you find that the label of ALD sibling is something that you feel is how you define yourself, or is it not on your top, 5 list of ways you describe yourself? Is it is it something lesser or not necessarily something that you prescribe to yourself? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Maggie, you go first.
For me, not so much. I think it's guided a lot of my interests, what I want to go to school for, blah, blah, blah. But
Neuroscience pre-med.
but I think because of part of the speech I memorized, but just being around you telling other people has been like part of it's been like, oh, he's fine. But this, it's been like I don't know, telling my friends, don't worry, shut up about him. Let's talk about me, that kind of thing. So I think I've pushed it in more of a, not disregarding it, but I don't see it as being any of his core identifiers, so it doesn't become one of mine.
Yeah.
But so it is, because I know there are parents that are writing in questions like, is this an inescapable burden? Is this something that labels all of us? Do the kids themselves years later still feel the weight of this? So you would say,
no, I think it's something, like Anna was saying, it's something that is sort of, it's been said, it's something that might happen, or things like that. But because it's the reality, it's all the time, it's on the back burner almost.
Yeah.
I'm not constantly, I guess, I don't know, thinking about it. When I was a kid, I wasn't super anxious about it, I don't think.
yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, I would say I do kind of define myself as an ALD sibling. It is a big sort of trait of mine. I don't know. And it's something I talk about a lot and whatnot. But I think part of that is because Jack's disabilities sort of it's just like describing my family. Oh, it would be weird for me to try and describe my life without explaining that my brother is super complicated and same as Maggie, totally has directed my interests and what I want to do with my life. And so it just comes up a lot, but I don't see it as a burden. I mean, there's definitely burdensome components, but I think I see it as it defines me in a very positive way. I get mostly satisfaction and empowerment from talking about it, rather than ugh, this is how I have to define myself. It's more so ooh, this is a huge part of who I am. And if I'm going to tell you who I am, you should know about this. And so, and I think in the ALD community, I personally like the idea of this ALD sibling being sort of a label you can choose to use, because I'm not a carrier and I don't have ALD, but it's a huge part of my life. And I think fitting in somewhere, even just at the annual meetings, obviously everyone is beyond welcoming and everyone is welcome there, but I'm always kind of how do I describe myself? Obviously I'm very affected by ALD, but I don't really fit any of the other groups. So I like the idea of ALD sibling. So yeah.
And I do hope those people listening who have younger children have some sort of relief hearing from these two girls who have lived very different experiences as siblings, two brothers, because their brothers have had such different experiences. And the idea that they're wearing the label and wearing it with pride, it almost sounds like.
Well, we're going to be great doctors.
Well, yeah. And no pressure, but all the siblings from now on need to go into
yes.
that. Yeah.
Welcome to neurology practice.
Exactly.
We'll have an ALD siblings practice. That would be amazing.
I love it. I love it. But it does, I mean, we speak every day, but hearing this, It's just
Wow.
lovely to
She's
hear.
gonna cry a
I
little
am,
later.
I am
It's gonna be.
Kathleen, tears.
Oh my God, I know. It's really crazy. It's there's some really nice comments in the chat, both Anna and Maggie. I hope you look through. But it's 8:15, 8:16 on the East Coast, and we've gone a little over our prescribed hour, but I think worth every moment. I know personally, I am not only am I impressed and in awe of our daughters, but Jesse, I would like to I'm giving you a virtual high five. A mom high five that I think, you don't have to do everything perfectly to still come down this pathway and, have good relationships with your kids and, stumble along the way and still, come down this path. I'm grateful for all the people that tuned in tonight live. This was huge. A lot of times people sign up and then they don't actually come. They like to watch the video later. So I'm grateful that everyone took the time to be here live and submit questions. If we didn't get to your question or comment or concern, please reach back out to, well, first of all, Jesse and I are almost omnipresent on social media and also available to submit your questions to ALD Connect. And we're happy to send answers directly to you. Also, as Jesse mentioned, if you're in the market for a therapist for your kids, and you are not lucky enough to live in New Jersey and be available to Jesse's services directly, she does have some resources to help connect you with the right caregiver or send you in a direction.
Absolutely. There's support groups. I have a long list, so I'm happy to help. Feel free to reach out.
And also, again, don't hesitate to look up. Look what we read at our house. They have big chapter books behind them. We're reading just right reading level books about our sick brother. But also, as a reminder that Alex TLC made a really fabulous book. And I do have some copies. So hit up ALD Connect and I'm happy to put it in the mail and send it to you. And also, as a cheap promo, again, November 3rd and 4th in this year, 2023 in Houston, Texas, we'll be having our 10th annual ALD Connect annual meeting. And we are going to be continuing some of these discussions as well as during our support calls every month. And I'm so grateful for Annie for Anna and Jesse. I'll make you one super name. Annie didn't work. For really coordinating this and for Maggie being willing to come along and for the ALD Connect staff for bringing us together. Thank you all so much and look forward to talking about this another time. Any closing thoughts, Jesse, Anna?
I'm just so honored that you all let me, talk for an hour about a subject that means so much to me and something that has been talked about a lot within the community. So let's continue the conversation moving forward and do what we can for these kids.
Yep, absolutely. Have a great night. Thanks for sharing your evening with us.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.